When HOA Karen harassed my pregnant wife with endless violations, I stayed quiet and documented everything. Then in court, she shocked everyone by demanding the death penalty for my wife and unborn child. Karen had no idea she was demanding execution from a superior court judge. Big mistake. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as I adjusted my tie and took a deep breath. My pregnant wife Sarah squeezed my hand, her 7-month belly prominent beneath her modest blue dress. Neither of us could have imagined that this simple property dispute would lead to the most shocking courtroom drama of our lives. "Are you ready for this, honey?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I looked down at my beautiful wife, carrying our first child, and felt a surge of protective anger. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Karen Whitmore has no idea what she's gotten herself into. My name is Michael Torres, and 3 months ago, I was just another resident of Meadowbrook Estates, trying to live peacefully with my pregnant wife. What our HOA president Karen Whitmore didn't know was that I was also Judge Michael Torres of the state superior court, a detail I had deliberately kept private to avoid the politics and favor-seeking that came with my position. Karen had been making our lives miserable for months, targeting us with petty violations and harassment that seemed to intensify as Sarah's pregnancy progressed. Today, her cruelty would reach levels that would shock even seasoned court observers and change our lives forever. The trouble started 8 months ago when Sarah and I moved into 1247 Maple Drive, a charming 2-story colonial house perfect for starting our family. We had specifically chosen Meadowbrook Estates because it seemed like a quiet, family-friendly neighborhood with tree-lined streets, well-maintained sidewalks, and the kind of community spirit we wanted for our children. What we didn't anticipate was Karen Whitmore and her reign of terror. Karen was a 54-year-old woman who had appointed herself the supreme ruler of our homeowners association. With her perfectly styled gray hair, expensive designer clothes, and perpetual scowl of disapproval, she patrolled the neighborhood like a military dictator, measuring grass heights with an actual ruler, timing how long visitors could park on the street with a stopwatch, and documenting every perceived violation with the dedication of a forensic investigator building a murder case. Her house at 1250 Maple Drive sat directly across from ours, giving her a perfect vantage point to monitor our every move. From her front window, equipped with binoculars and a notebook, Karen watched our daily routines with the intensity of a CIA surveillance operation. From our very first day, Karen had made it crystal clear that she didn't approve of us. Perhaps it was our youth. Sarah was 28 and I was 32, making us significantly younger than most residents. Perhaps it was our ethnicity. We were one of only 3 Hispanic families in the predominantly white, upper-middle-class neighborhood. Or perhaps Karen simply enjoyed exercising power over people she perceived as vulnerable newcomers who didn't know their place in her carefully constructed hierarchy. The harassment began subtly but relentlessly. Citations for leaving our garage door open for more than 30 minutes while unloading groceries from our weekend shopping trips. Complaints about Sarah's small flower garden being too colorful, and not in keeping with neighborhood aesthetics, because she had planted bright sunflowers and red roses instead of the approved white and pale yellow flowers that Karen preferred. Demands that we remove the small wooden bench Sarah liked to sit on while reading her pregnancy books, claiming it violated some obscure bylaw about unauthorized outdoor furniture that seemed to exist only in Karen's twisted interpretation of the HOA rules. The bench had been a wedding gift from Sarah's grandmother, and watching my wife cry as she moved it to our backyard broke my heart. Each citation came with increasingly aggressive letters, mounting fines and escalating threats of legal action. The letters were typed in bold, capital letters and contained phrases like, "immediate compliance required," and "failure to remedy will result in maximum penalties." Sarah, dealing with morning sickness and the emotional stress of her first pregnancy, would often cry after receiving Karen's latest missive. "Why does she hate us so much?" Sarah asked one evening, holding another threatening letter from the HOA while tears streamed down her face. "We've done nothing wrong. We're good people. We pay our fees, we keep our property nice, and we're friendly to everyone. What did we do to deserve this treatment?" I held my pregnant wife close, feeling her tears soak through my shirt and her body shake with quiet sobs. "Some people are just bullies, sweetheart. She'll get tired of this game eventually. Once she realizes we're not going anywhere, she'll find someone else to torment." But I was completely wrong. Karen's campaign of harassment only intensified as time went on, becoming more personal and vindictive with each passing week. When Sarah began showing at 4 months, her growing belly seeming to trigger something even more sinister in Karen's already twisted mind, the attacks became brazenly discriminatory. She filed complaints about Sarah's maternity clothes being inappropriate when she collected the mail, claiming that pregnant women should dress more modestly and not flaunt their condition in public spaces. She complained to the HOA board that our preparation for the baby, accepting deliveries of a crib, changing table, stroller and other baby supplies, was creating excessive noise and disruption to the neighborhood's peace and quiet. She even tried to argue that the presence of baby items visible through our windows was advertising that we were planning to have children, which would somehow alter the demographic character of the community. The complaints became increasingly bizarre and personal. Karen objected to Sarah's pregnancy waddle, claiming it was undignified and made the neighborhood look low-class. She complained about the frequency of my doctor visits with Sarah, saying that medical vehicles were commercial traffic that violated residential parking rules. The breaking point came when Sarah, now 6 months pregnant and glowing with the joy of impending motherhood, was placed on strict bed rest by her obstetrician due to complications with her blood pressure and early signs of preeclampsia. Dr. Martinez had been very clear that any stress could trigger a dangerous condition that could threaten both Sarah's life and our baby's survival. Karen, apparently viewing Sarah's medical condition as an opportunity rather than a reason for basic human compassion, filed 17 separate violations in 1 week. The harassment reached levels that seemed designed to cause maximum stress and emotional damage to a vulnerable pregnant woman. She cited us for newspapers accumulating on the driveway while Sarah couldn't physically retrieve them. She complained that our lawn looked neglected because I was spending more time caring for my bedridden wife than on yard work. She even filed a violation claiming that the medical equipment delivery truck, bringing a hospital bed and monitoring equipment prescribed by Sarah's doctor, had violated parking regulations by staying longer than the arbitrary 15-minute limit she had invented. When I called Karen to discuss the situation, hoping to appeal to whatever humanity might exist beneath her cruel exterior, the conversation revealed the true depth of her malice. "This is harassment," I told Karen during a heated phone call, my voice shaking with controlled anger. "My wife is on bed rest with serious pregnancy complications. Have some human decency. She could lose our baby if her stress levels get too high." "The rules don't change because someone decides to get pregnant," Karen replied coldly, her voice dripping with contempt. "If you can't maintain your property to community standards, perhaps you should consider moving somewhere more suitable to your lifestyle. Maybe a trailer park would be more appropriate for people like you." The racist implication was clear, and I felt my blood pressure spike with rage. "People like us? What exactly do you mean by that?" "I think you know exactly what I mean," Karen said with a cruel laugh. "This neighborhood has standards and some people just don't fit in. Your wife's condition is not my problem. Rules are rules." That night, Sarah had a severe panic attack from the stress of Karen's relentless harassment. Her blood pressure spiked to dangerous levels, and we had to rush to the emergency room at 2 a.m., both of us terrified that we might lose our precious baby because of one woman's cruelty. "Mr. Torres," Dr. Martinez said seriously after examining Sarah and monitoring the baby's heartbeat, "your wife needs to avoid all stress for the remainder of her pregnancy. Any additional emotional pressure could lead to full preeclampsia, premature labor, or even fetal distress. Both her life and your baby's life could be at serious risk if this continues." The doctor's words hit me like a physical blow. Karen Whitmore's harassment wasn't just making our lives miserable, it was literally threatening to kill my wife and unborn child. I made a decision that night, sitting in the hospital room watching Sarah sleep fitfully with monitors tracking our baby's vital signs. Karen Whitmore would face the full consequences of her cruelty, but I would do it the right way, through the legal system I had sworn to serve with honor and integrity. What Karen didn't know was that I had been carefully documenting every single one of her harassing actions from the very beginning. Every letter, every citation, every phone call, every neighbor she had enlisted in her campaign against us was recorded, photographed, and cataloged in a comprehensive file that would make any prosecutor weep with joy. I had also been quietly reaching out to other neighbors, discovering that Karen had been systematically terrorizing multiple families with similar tactics. Her pattern of abuse was extensive and well documented, spanning several years and dozens of victims. The elderly Johnsons, a sweet couple in their 70s, had been cited 43 times in 2 years for violations like grass clippings visible on sidewalk for more than 4 hours, and mailbox position 2 inches too far left of approved placement. The accumulated fines had cost them over $2,000 and caused Mr. Johnson to have stress-related chest pains. The young Mitchell family, with 3 children under age 8, had been fined over $3,000 for violations including children's bicycles stored in driveway overnight, Christmas decorations displayed beyond acceptable time frame, and unauthorized chalk art on sidewalk. Their 6-year-old daughter had been reduced to tears when Karen screamed at her for drawing hopscotch squares with washable chalk. The Rodriguez family had been harassed for having too many cars when their college-age son came home for visits. Karen had actually called a tow truck to have his car removed from their own driveway, claiming it violated occupancy limits. Each family had a similar story: systematic harassment, discriminatory enforcement, escalating fines, and personal attacks that seemed designed to force them from the neighborhood. The pattern was clear, deliberate, and legally actionable. I filed a comprehensive federal lawsuit against Karen Whitmore and the HOA for harassment, discrimination, intentional infliction of emotional distress, violation of fair housing laws, and civil rights violations under Section 1983. The case was assigned to Judge Patricia Wells, a respected colleague who had no idea of my identity as a resident of Meadowbrook Estates. Karen, represented by a lawyer who clearly didn't understand the legal minefield his client had created, decided to countersue us for malicious prosecution and defamation. Her attorney, David Morrison, seemed to be feeding into Karen's delusions of grandeur rather than advising her to settle quietly and avoid the devastating exposure that would come with a public trial. The discovery phase revealed the true extent of Karen's systematic harassment and exposed her underlying motivations. We uncovered dozens of emails where she discussed getting rid of undesirable residents and maintaining the proper demographic balance in the neighborhood. We found records showing she had specifically targeted minority families, young couples, and anyone who didn't fit her narrow definition of appropriate residence. In one particularly damning email to another HOA board member, Karen had written, "We need to make life so difficult for these people that they voluntarily leave. If we can't keep them out legally, we'll force them out through aggressive enforcement. The Torres family is priority number 1. We cannot allow their kind to establish a foothold in our community." But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared us for what Karen would do during the actual trial. The weeks leading up to the trial were filled with preparation and anxiety. Sarah, now 8 months pregnant and on complete bed rest, couldn't attend most of the pretrial meetings. I watched her grow more stressed each day, despite my attempts to shield her from the legal proceedings. "I just want this to be over," Sarah said one evening, her hand resting on her swollen belly as our baby kicked actively inside her. "I want our child to be born into peace, not into this war that woman has declared on us. It will be over soon," I promised, kissing her forehead. "And when it is, Karen Whitmore will never be able to hurt another family the way she's hurt us." On the morning of opening statements, Sarah insisted on attending despite her doctor's concerns. She was now 36 weeks pregnant, visibly uncomfortable, and still dealing with blood pressure issues that required constant monitoring. "I need to be there," she said firmly when I suggested she stay home. "This is our fight, and I won't let that woman think she's intimidated me into hiding." Karen arrived at the courthouse with an entourage of HOA board members and several neighbors who supported her reign of terror. She wore an expensive black power suit and carried herself with the arrogance of someone who believed she was completely untouchable and above any consequences for her actions. "There's the troublemakers," Karen said loudly enough for us to hear as we passed in the hallway, her voice dripping with contempt. "Some people have no respect for community standards or proper behavior." Sarah's hand tightened on my arm, her wedding ring pressing into my skin as she fought back tears of humiliation. But I squeezed her hand reassuringly, drawing strength from the knowledge that Karen had no idea what was coming. "Just a few more hours, sweetheart," I whispered. "Then this nightmare will all be over and justice will finally be served." The trial began with our attorney, Maria Rodriguez, presenting a clear and devastating timeline of Karen's harassment campaign. The evidence was overwhelming and meticulously organized: dozens of frivolous citations, discriminatory enforcement patterns, escalating threats, and documented attempts to force minority families from the neighborhood. "Your Honor," Maria argued with passion and precision, "the defendants have engaged in a systematic campaign of harassment targeting my clients specifically because of their age, ethnicity, and family status. This harassment has continued and actually intensified even after Mrs. Torres was placed on medical bed rest for serious pregnancy complications that could threaten both her life and her unborn child's survival." Maria presented email evidence, witness testimony, and expert analysis showing that Karen's enforcement was selectively targeted and discriminatory. The pattern was undeniable. White, established families received warnings or no citations at all for identical violations that resulted in immediate fines and threats for minority residents. Karen's attorney, Mr. Morrison, presented a weak and increasingly desperate defense claiming that Karen was simply enforcing community standards uniformly, and that any problems were the result of the Torres family's refusal to comply with reasonable regulations that all residents must follow. But his arguments fell apart under the weight of evidence showing Karen's selective enforcement and the personal nature of her attacks on pregnant Sarah. Then came the moment that would change everything and expose Karen's true nature to the world. During Karen's testimony, she became increasingly agitated and defensive as Maria cross-examined her about the discriminatory pattern of her enforcement actions and her personal animosity toward the Torres family. "Mrs. Whitmore," Maria asked calmly, "can you explain why the Torres family received 17 citations in 1 week while other residents with identical or worse violations received none?" "They were the most serious violations I had documented," Karen replied, her face flushing red with anger at being questioned. "More serious than the Henderson family's boat that's been parked in their driveway for 6 months without a single citation? That's completely different," Karen snapped, her composure beginning to crack. "Different how, Mrs. Whitmore?" "The Hendersons are established residents who contribute positively to the community," Karen said, her mask of reasonableness slipping away to reveal the ugly prejudice beneath. "They understand what we're trying to maintain here. They respect our values and traditions." "And what exactly are you trying to maintain, Mrs. Whitmore?" Maria pressed, sensing that Karen was about to reveal her true motivations. That's when Karen completely lost control, her years of contained hatred and prejudice exploding in a courtroom full of witnesses. "Standards," she screamed, jumping to her feet with wild eyes and pointing an accusatory finger at Sarah. "We're trying to maintain standards. We can't have people like them bringing down property values and destroying the character of our neighborhood. We can't let them breed and multiply and turn our community into some kind of ghetto." The courtroom fell into shocked silence. Sarah gasped and placed both hands protectively over her swollen belly, tears streaming down her face as Karen's naked racism was finally exposed. I felt my jaw clench and my hands ball into fists as this woman's true nature was revealed in all its ugly glory. But Karen wasn't done. Fueled by years of resentment and emboldened by what she perceived as support from her HOA cronies, she continued her racist tirade. "People like them?" Maria pressed, giving Karen enough rope to hang herself completely. "Young troublemakers who think they can move in and change everything." Karen's voice rose to a hysterical shriek that echoed off the courtroom walls. "People who don't respect authority or understand proper behavior. People who think they can just breed without any consideration for the impact on decent families and property values." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. She began to hyperventilate, her face pale and her hands shaking as she struggled to breathe. I moved to comfort her, but Maria continued her methodical destruction of Karen's credibility. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you saying that pregnancy and childbearing are violations of community standards?" "In some cases, absolutely," Karen screamed, completely unhinged now. "When the wrong kind of people start breeding, it destroys everything decent people have worked to build." The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Several people in the gallery gasped in horror. Judge Wells banged her gavel repeatedly, trying to maintain order as Karen's meltdown continued. But Karen wasn't finished. In a moment of pure delusion, uncontrolled rage and racist hatred that would be remembered as one of the most shocking outbursts in legal history, she pointed directly at my pregnant wife and said the words that would destroy her life forever. "Your Honor, I demand the death penalty for this woman. She has violated our community standards repeatedly, refused to comply with legitimate authority, shown complete disrespect for proper residents, and is now breeding more problems for our neighborhood. She deserves the ultimate punishment for her crimes against our community. Execute her as an example to other troublemakers." The courtroom exploded in chaos. Judge Wells banged her gavel frantically, trying to restore order as gasps and shouts filled the air. Sarah burst into hysterical tears, her body shaking as she held her belly protectively. I stood up, my face burning with rage, ready to say something that would reveal my identity. Serving in any HOA capacity, prohibited from contacting my family in any manner, and restricted from entering our neighborhood except to access your own property. But I wasn't finished delivering justice. Furthermore, given your expressed desire to see harm come to pregnant women and children, your demonstrated pattern of targeting vulnerable residents based on race and ethnicity, and your public call for executing members of minority families, I am recommending that the district attorney investigate whether your actions constitute hate crimes under both state and federal law. Karen finally broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably as the full consequences of her hatred and racism became clear. Her life as she knew it was over, destroyed by her own words and actions. The story exploded across national and international media within hours. HOA Karen demands death penalty for judge's pregnant wife became one of the most shared news stories of the year. Karen's photo appeared on every major news outlet around the world, with legal experts, civil rights advocates, and child protection organizations explaining how her own courtroom outburst had provided irrefutable evidence of her discriminatory intent and danger to society. Within 24 hours, Karen lost her high-paying job at the insurance company where she had worked for 12 years. Her employer issued a statement saying they could not and would not employ someone who publicly advocates for the execution of pregnant women and promotes racial hatred. Her husband of 22 years filed for divorce that same day, stating publicly that he could not remain married to someone who would wish death upon an innocent pregnant woman and her unborn child. He moved out immediately, taking their teenage children who were horrified and ashamed by their mother's actions. The HOA voted unanimously to remove her from the board and filed their own lawsuit against her for bringing negative publicity to the community and violating her fiduciary duties. Property values actually increased after her removal, with real estate agents reporting that families were specifically seeking homes in the neighborhood that stood up to the racist HOA tyrant. The other families Karen had systematically harassed came forward with their own stories, leading to a massive class action lawsuit that would eventually cost her everything she owned. The Johnson family, the Mitchells, the Rodriguez family, and 6 other families joined together to seek justice for years of discriminatory harassment. But the most satisfying consequence came 3 months later when Sarah gave birth to our beautiful, healthy daughter, Elena Rose Torres. The entire neighborhood threw an impromptu block party to celebrate, with dozens of families bringing gifts, congratulations, and tears of joy for the baby that Karen had once wanted to see killed. "I can't believe that evil woman wanted to hurt this precious angel," said Mrs. Johnson, our elderly neighbor, holding baby Elena with tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "She's absolutely perfect. How could anyone wish harm on such an innocent child?" Sarah, glowing with health and happiness for the first time in months, smiled as she watched our daughter being loved by the community that had rallied to protect us. "Karen thought she was protecting the neighborhood from us," Sarah observed. "Instead, she brought everyone together to protect us from her. Our daughter will grow up surrounded by people who chose love over hatred." The Henderson family, who had received Karen's favorable treatment because they were white and established residents, publicly apologized for not speaking up sooner against the discrimination they had witnessed. "We should have said something when we saw how she was treating your family," Mr. Henderson told us at Elena's celebration, his voice heavy with shame. "We were cowards who benefited from her racism while you suffered. We're deeply sorry and we promise to never stand silent again when we see injustice." Even more satisfying was the news that Karen had been forced to move to a different state after being unable to find employment or housing locally. Every Google search of her name brought up stories about the death penalty Karen, who had demanded the execution of a pregnant woman and her unborn child in court. She destroyed her own life with her hatred. Sarah observed one peaceful evening as we watched Elena sleep in her crib, surrounded by gifts from neighbors who had once been strangers. And in the process she made our community stronger and more united than ever before. 6 months after Elena's birth, I received a pathetic letter forwarded from Karen's current address in a different state. It was a rambling, self-pitying attempt at an apology that revealed she still didn't understand the magnitude of her actions. "I never meant for things to go so far," she wrote in shaky handwriting. "I was just trying to maintain community standards and property values. I didn't know you were a judge. If I had known who you were, I would never have acted that way. Please find it in your heart to forgive me and help me rebuild my life." I showed the letter to Sarah, who shook her head in disgust and disappointment. "She still doesn't get it," Sarah said, holding Elena close. "She's not sorry for what she did, she's sorry she got caught and faced consequences. And she's only apologizing because she found out you're a judge. What about all the other families she terrorized who weren't judges? Don't they deserve apologies too? What about our daughter, who she wanted to see killed before she was even born?" Sarah was absolutely right. Karen's letter made it clear that she still didn't understand that her actions were fundamentally wrong regardless of my profession or position. She was sorry she had targeted someone with power to fight back, not sorry she had engaged in harassment, discrimination, and calls for violence against innocent people. I threw the letter in the trash without responding. Karen Whitmore had made her choices, and now she would live with the consequences forever. 2 years later, our neighborhood has been completely transformed into the welcoming, inclusive community we had originally hoped to find. The new HOA board, elected after Karen's removal, focuses on genuine community building rather than discriminatory enforcement and petty power games. They organize family events, maintain common areas, address real issues like safety and infrastructure, and have created policies specifically designed to prevent the kind of abuse Karen had inflicted on so many families. The discriminatory bylaws that Karen had weaponized against minority families have been completely rewritten to focus on legitimate community concerns rather than subjective standards that could be used to target specific residents. Property values have increased significantly as word spread that Meadowbrook Estates was now a genuinely welcoming, family-friendly community. Elena is now a happy, healthy 2-year-old who is absolutely adored by the entire neighborhood. The elderly residents fight over who gets to push her stroller during walks. The other families with children have organized regular playdates and support groups. What Karen tried to destroy with her hatred has flourished into something beautiful and lasting. Do you ever regret not telling the neighborhood who you were from the beginning? Sarah asked me recently as we watched Elena play in our front yard with the Mitchell children, their laughter filling the air with pure joy. I considered the question seriously, watching our daughter's innocent happiness and thinking about the journey that had brought us to this moment. No, I finally answered. If I had revealed my position immediately, people would have treated us differently out of fear or self-interest rather than genuine kindness. We would never have known who our real friends were, and Karen might have been more careful to hide her true nature. This way we got to see people's real character when they thought there would be no consequences for their choices. Sarah nodded, understanding completely. And now Elena gets to grow up in a community where people chose to stand up for what's right, not because they were afraid of a judge's power, but because it was the right thing to do. That's the kind of world I want for our daughter. The legal consequences for Karen continued to mount long after our trial ended. The district attorney did indeed file hate crime charges based on her pattern of targeting minority families and her public call for executing a pregnant woman based on her race and ethnicity. She was convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of probation during which she would be prohibited from serving in any community leadership role and required to complete extensive counseling for racism and anger management. The massive class action lawsuit filed by all the families she had systematically harassed resulted in additional damages of over $3.2 million. Karen lost her house, her savings, her pension, and any hope of rebuilding her life or reputation. Most importantly for the future, her case became a landmark legal precedent for HOA abuse cases nationwide. Law schools now teach the Torres versus Whitmore case as a definitive example of how discrimination can be proven through pattern evidence and how hatred ultimately destroys those who embrace it. Legal textbooks include the transcript of Karen's courtroom meltdown as an example of how prejudice and power can corrupt people completely, and how the justice system can protect vulnerable families from systematic harassment. Your family's case has helped countless other families across the country, Maria Rodriguez, our attorney, told me at a national legal conference where the case was being discussed as a landmark civil rights victory. HOA lawyers everywhere are now warning their clients about the consequences of discriminatory enforcement. Karen Whitmore's hatred ended up protecting thousands of families she'll never meet. The irony was absolutely perfect. Karen's attempt to make our neighborhood pure and drive out families she deemed undesirable had instead made it a national model of inclusivity and community cooperation. Her demand for the death penalty for my pregnant wife had led to stronger legal protections for pregnant women and minority families across the entire country. Her racism had sparked a movement toward more inclusive communities nationwide. Elena will grow up in a world where Karen Whitmore's name is permanently synonymous with the consequences of hatred, discrimination, and the abuse of power. She'll learn that when people try to use authority to hurt others, justice will eventually prevail and love will triumph over hate. Mama, why do people smile when they talk about our house? Elena asked Sarah recently, her vocabulary expanding rapidly as she approached her 3rd birthday. Sarah smiled, picking up our daughter and pointing to the neighbors working together in the beautiful community garden that had been planted where Karen's foreclosed house used to stand. Because, sweetie, our home brought all these wonderful people together. Sometimes bad people try to hurt good people, but when that happens, all the good people join together to protect each other. And that's what makes a real community, people choosing to love and protect each other. Elena clapped her hands with delight, not fully understanding the profound truth in her mother's words but sensing the love and warmth that surrounded our family every single day. As for Karen Whitmore, she remains a cautionary tale told in law schools, civil rights seminars, HOA training programs and community organization workshops across the country and around the world. The woman who demanded the death penalty for a pregnant woman learned that hatred and discrimination carry their own death penalty. The death of respect, relationships, reputation, and any hope of redemption or forgiveness. Meanwhile, Elena Torres grows up surrounded by unconditional love, protected by a community that chose compassion over cruelty, and blissfully unaware that she was once targeted for death by a woman who couldn't see past her own prejudice and hatred. Justice, as it turns out, has its own perfect way of protecting the innocent and punishing those who would harm them. Karen Whitmore discovered that truth far too late to save herself, but just in time to serve as a permanent warning to others who might be tempted to follow her path of hatred and discrimination. In the end, love won decisively. Community triumphed over division. And Elena Torres gets to grow up in a world where her neighbors chose to stand up for what's right, even when they didn't know a judge was watching. That final truth echoes through our neighborhood every day, a reminder that justice prevails when good people stand together against hatred. Karen Whitmore's legacy is not the fear she tried to spread, but the unity she accidentally created through her cruelty. Elena's laughter fills the air where Karen's anger once poisoned the atmosphere. Our daughter plays freely in a neighborhood that chose love over hate, protection over persecution, and community over division. The woman who demanded death for an innocent child learned that her own hatred would be the only thing to die. Meanwhile, life, beautiful, precious, innocent life, continues to flourish in the community she tried to destroy. And that is justice in its purest, most perfect form.